up in red. And I just want to reiterate what Dan said last night. And tomorrow the Reflections workshop will be at 10 o'clock, I believe, in Sarah Major. So if you have never been to that, it's really a pretty awesome, powerful 2 hours of sharing about what Camp Mac has done for you again this year. So we look forward to seeing you there. We've experimented with the lighting a little bit. I hope everybody's comfortable out there, and if it's too dark, no sleeping. I've asked Alex from Cincinnati to come up and introduce our speaker.
Good evening, family. I'm an addict. My name is Alex. Just want to take a minute of your time and introduce tonight's speaker, and thanks for the warm welcome since I've been here. Tonight's speaker is a guy that I met in somewhere around 1998, and for my first meeting, I really felt like this guy was really special. His voice and the way he carried himself was, as I described to another friend of mine, another addict friend, is he was like a cough drop to a sore throat. He asked me back in 98 or so where was I at with the steps. And my process has been kind of bouncing around with those for a number of years. We kind of went our separate ways for a little while, and a year ago I had an opportunity to bump into him again in Cleveland, Ohio. And since then, we've been talking pretty regular. And this guy's real special to me. He's introduced me again to the steps. I'm doing a lot better. And he's just a guy that I believe really loves this program. He's passionate about it. And without any further from me, I want to introduce to you all Phil O. from New York, New York.
I'm an addict. My name's Phil. Hello, Cincinnati. Hello, Indiana. Where am I? It's great to be here. I want to start out by giving hope to any new member or anyone who's been coming around a while and is in the Finally Ready group, and who are also middle-aged. Any old newcomers, anyone who isn't, the usual age that people come into this program. I want to give you hope. I got here at age 51. I have 21 years clean. And simple addition will tell you I'm 72. Yeah, that's the part you're supposed to act surprised. It's great to be here. It's been a great weekend, hasn't it? You got something special here. I attend a lot of conventions, but you got something special here. I have rarely experienced such warmth and friendliness. Obviously, the ambience of the venue is impressive. And I'll tell you one thing that really impressed me is in the workshops and last night at this meeting, you people really sit still and listen during a meeting. There was very little moving around. I mean, New York City, where I come from, that's not usual. So I'm impressed with your taking seriously a meeting and maintaining an atmosphere of recovery. My home group, if you should ever get to New York, I'm in Manhattan, is a topic meeting that meets Tuesday nights and Thursday nights called Recurring Themes. You'll find it online, and I'm just about always there. Recurring Themes in New York City. Hope to see some of you there at some point. I came all the way from New York, and it was quite a journey. Some of you know, I've shared this with you over the weekend, but it wasn't simply getting in a plane and flying to a destination and being met at the airport and taken to the venue. No, I thought it would, but I went to the airport Thursday, and I was there on time, and I got on the plane, and we sat on the tarmac for 2 hours. There was weather trouble, and there was weather trouble further west over New Jersey, and there were planes stacked up. Plane went back to the gate. We sat there another hour, and then they announced that the flight was canceled. Now, on a non-holiday weekend, that's not so terrible. But what was revealed is all that airline's flights that night and all day Friday were full. So I went to Plan B and called Amtrak, and they were fully booked for the whole weekend. And I thought, oh my gosh, I might not be able to get to Indiana. So I called the Greyhound, and they had a seat, and I was able to leave late afternoon Thursday and arrive Friday morning, probably a little tired from sitting in my chair, sleeping in my chair, but, and then the bus broke down. Well, not exactly broke down. The windshield wipers didn't work, and it was raining, and the forecast was driving rains further along. And they had to fix it. They had to stop and fix it. Now, there was a change of buses in Cleveland that I missed that connection. We got to Cleveland, I had to wait for the next bus. Finally arrived here 20 hours after I got in the bus back in New York. After 5 hours hanging them out in the airport. It was quite a journey. But Shakespeare got it right. All's well that ends well. And I'm very glad I got here. In coming from New York to Indiana to share my story, I know that my story is your story. And furthermore, it's our story. Same story. Literature says we're more alike than different. I believe we're very much alike, especially in all the most important ways. We are survivors of the same near-fatal catastrophe. That's a pretty important way right there. Literature says that when we come to NA, we discover we're part of a very special group of people who have suffered. I believe we have the same story. I believe that. And there are basically 3 parts to our story. The first part is, as kids, in some way or other, we got the message that we were not lovable. We got that message. Maybe we were neglected. Or maybe we were abandoned. Maybe we were given off to grandparents to be brought up, or foster care. And we looked at that from the point of view of kids, which don't have the ability to process it, and we thought it was our fault, that we were lacking, that we're not lovable, something wrong with us. Maybe we were abused or just not taken seriously. parents didn't come to our Little League game or our dance recital. And we internalized that. Something wrong. They don't love me. I guess I'm not lovable. We didn't have the wherewithal to process that. Maybe we were the black sheep of the family. Our siblings got all the love. We got hand-me-down clothes. They were the favored child. Maybe we were told at some point something that couldn't be taken back but was indelible. Maybe a parent or somebody told us, "You'll never amount to anything." Or "We wish we never had you." And that stuck. And we internalized it. Does anyone identify with any of that? Okay. Myself. My father worked long hours by choice. He lived in the house. He came home to sleep, and he got up early the next morning and went to work. And then he was on trips related to work. It was easy to come to the conclusion that I wasn't very important to him, that probably there was something wrong with me, that I wasn't lovable. My mother, on the other hand, overprotected me. She was always there. I was hoping for a little neglect. I was kept in the house, and if there was a reason to go out of the house, I had to be accompanied either by her or some adult family member. I could ask to be taken to the circus or to a movie, and they would take me. I would get anything I wanted along those lines, but they had to go along. And I couldn't play with the kids next door. That was next door. I couldn't cross the street in the small town I grew up in by myself till I was in my teens. I felt like a dog on a leash. I was under house arrest and I was under surveillance all the time. And I interpreted that as my mother had some agenda for herself in raising me that way, and that it wasn't personal. There wasn't any personal affection for me. It was just the way she was going to raise a child. And I felt unlovable. Step working guide. Many of us have discovered our problems didn't begin the first time we took drugs, but long before, when the seeds of our addiction were actually planted. We may have felt isolated and different long before we took drugs. Second part of our story, we don't have the right stuff. We got that from society or parts of society. We got a message. Society, look on television at those ads. Material things are very important. You better have the right brand of sneakers. You better have a Lexus rather than a Ford. If you were in a family that was not possible and you had to wear another brand of sneakers, or you couldn't have a lot of material things, you internalized that. Most of us did, that we didn't have what society really values. Society really values people that come on with a lot of confidence, a lot of self-confidence. Whether they have it or not, they show it. They show that they might have it. And they devalue people that are a little bit tentative, a little bit emotional. That's just the way society is. You better have a mate in society. That's what they promote. It says you're incomplete unless you have a mate. You're worthless without a mate. And it helps if the mate is good looking. So we don't care if it's a trophy, talking as society. It can be a trophy. You don't have to have a real good relationship, but it'll look good. And if you don't have a mate, there's something wrong. And if you're a man who's emotional, that's no good. Women are supposed to be emotional. Men don't cry. And if you're a woman You're not supposed to be assertive. No, no, no. So if we're inherently emotional as men or assertive as women, it's easy to surmise that we don't have the right stuff, the stuff that society values. Or maybe we walk with a limp, talk with a stutter. Maybe we have the wrong skin color or the wrong sexual preference or the wrong body type. So now we're adults, we're in society, and we're getting this message. And we start using drugs around this time. I got out into society with the childhood I had with no experience interacting with people my own age, and I had no social skills as a result. No social skills. I was the guy, that awkward guy, that fidgety guy that didn't know what to do with his hands and couldn't make eye contact and certainly couldn't make small talk. And I was ridiculed and bullied. I didn't have the right stuff. I was easily intimidated. If somebody I knew raised an issue with me and also raised their voice while they were raising the issue, I cowered. I got nervous. I couldn't respond. If I went through my early life, my early adult life, picking people to be in my life. That was going to be the solution. I would decide on somebody I wanted in my life because I had trouble making friends. I would decide, and whether they showed me any encouragement or not was beside the point. How they felt about it was I was going to convince them to be in my life. That was the only way I was going to get somebody in my life. So I was very, we would call it, willful. And they all escaped. It didn't work. And even when it seemed to work out with people, even when I was getting some of the affection I was seeking, such as in a romantic relationship, because I'm talking about I was a failure in all kinds of relationships, even when I was getting the affection I was seeking, it never felt real. This can't be happening. It's not going to last. It isn't real. I couldn't even enjoy it when I got it. I didn't have the right stuff. So we're not lovable. We don't have the right stuff. Now we're using drugs more, and we're doing the things that people do when they use drugs. And we look at that, and we say to ourselves, I'm doing these things. I'm just bad because I'm doing these bad things. We didn't know there was such a thing as a disease. We took as much as we could from whomever we could. We were takers. We were spiritually bankrupt. We couldn't afford the spirit of generosity. We couldn't give more than we got. All my interactions were predicated on getting more than I gave. Anyone identify with that? Because you listen very well, but sometimes I wonder what you're thinking out there. We harmed many people. Some of us stole from our families. We burned bridges, places we couldn't go back to. We harmed ourselves, our finances, our health, our self-image, how we look to ourselves. We were in degradation of some form or another. I know some of us laughed at jokes that weren't funny. We sold people a dream. We did things like that. Degradation. And we internalized this view of ourself, because we did have some kind of conscience out there. We didn't just suddenly get it in here. We internalized the view that I must be terrible to be doing these things, just as we couldn't help but do these things. Active addiction, I was this failure in relationships, and it really hurt. And it would manifest in simple things like walking down the sidewalk in New York. I don't drive, so a lot of my road rage was on sidewalks. So I'm walking out of my apartment, and somebody's on my sidewalk, and they're walking too fast, and you're running up my back, what are you doing? And I thought my voice could be carried for blocks away, and somebody is in front of me, and you share the sidewalk, what are you doing? I'm getting in altercations on the sidewalk and telling myself, no, next time I'm not going to do it. I'm going to restaurants and making scenes. Next time I'm not going to do it. But the next time I did it. I was out of control. I had a business, a one-man business, and at that point I got a brilliant idea and I started using during work hours. It wasn't a good idea because I ran the business into the ground. I had one highlight in my life. Once a year, I would take an international trip, carefully chosen, to a country known for the availability of drugs. I would go to the bookstore, and somewhere in the guidebook it would say, "This part of the country has been taken over by the drug culture. Don't go." So I would write down where that was, buy a ticket to where I had to fly to, and get to that place, and through the funny money barrier, through the language barrier, through the culture barrier, standing out like a sore thumb, I would cop in dangerous places. If any of you saw the movie Midnight Express, that's what I'm talking about. And I did this every year, a different country. Once I copped, I became a tourist. Through the haze, I saw some of the world's greatest sights. I saw the region in the area I copped, and when I went to this one place, I crossed over into a country called Malaysia with drugs in my pocket and high, and that country had the automatic death penalty for anyone with any amount of any illegal substance. I might have been mugged or frisked, or anything could have happened. Oh, and by the way, they do it by firing squad. I knew there was something wrong with this picture, but I couldn't do anything about it. I was driven. At the end, I was a recluse in New York. That means somebody that's withdrawn from society. I'm in one of the biggest cities in the world, and I'm staying in my apartment most of the time. I'm afraid to go out. I'm having altercations on the damn sidewalk, just stepping out of my apartment. I'm a recluse in my apartment with my drugs. And the end was the nights. I live on the second floor, the window's open, it's summertime. I'm sitting there with my stash and my munchies and the radio playing music and the ball game on the television, and I'm trying, high as a kite, to read a damn newspaper, overstimulating myself so I wouldn't have to feel. And through this all, I'm hearing outside the window people going by, laughing, and obviously with people they like being with, and have people who have friends, and people who are related to each other. And I'm sitting there thinking that whatever that quality is that allows people to have friends and have people in their lives and interact with people and laugh and have, whatever that quality is, I didn't have, and I would never have. And I began to plot my own suicide. I had the means necessary in my apartment, and before I did the deadly deed, I figured I'd try this place a few blocks away, an NA clubhouse that I had stood in front of high as a kite, kind of curious. listening to their applause and their laughs and so on. I never went in. This time, I went in. Not expecting to find what I was looking for, a reason to try to live without using drugs. That's what I came listening for. Newcomer, a lot of us, when we get here, we don't just instantly decide to stay. So, if you're, as I was, skeptical and actually looking for obstacles, because newcomers do, they try to disqualify themselves and disprove the evidence of addiction. And if you're like me, do what I did, which I am amazed I was able to do, which is to keep coming back and work through those obstacles. And one by one, the obstacles got conquered. It was a process, not an event, for me to decide to stay. My first meeting, I'm just checking out what in the world you do here. I sat in the back, behind a post. I wanted to be like the fly on the wall, go on with whatever it is you do here. But you came up to me and introduced yourself and hugged me, and someone else did, and someone else, and you wanted to know my name, and someone else did, and I made up a name. I didn't know what was, I didn't expect to stay, so what's the difference? I made up a name. And I kind of liked what I heard. You were doing something really amazing. You were sharing about all the ways you felt bad about yourself, all your insecurities, all your fears. They were all the things I worked very hard to hide. That was amazing to me. So I did keep coming back. Not at all sure I wanted to do what you were doing, but it was fascinating. And it was so fascinating that you started talking about there are other meetings. They weren't only in this clubhouse, and there was something called a meeting list. Oh, a meeting. And there's a list of other meetings in Manhattan, and they're like this, but they're in other I was curious. But darn it, the meeting list was on the table in the front. And I'm in the back, and if I walked, everyone would be looking at me. That was a long walk, and I got there early, and still there were too many people that I couldn't do it. But we're resourceful. So I sent a stamped, self-addressed envelope to the regional office, and they sent me a meeting list. You said the most amazing things. You said, newcomer, you're going to have some bad days. We took away the drugs. They medicated your feelings. You're going to have a day or a moment when you feel really bad about something. Please, newcomer, raise your hand in a meeting or pull someone over or make a phone call. Tell us what's bothering you. Let us know. And if you explain what's going on, by the end of talking about it, you will likely feel better. That didn't make any sense. How could that, talking about something that will make me feel better about what, that didn't make any sense. But I had that first bad day, and I was willing to try it. And there were some familiar faces and some people that knew my name, that other name. And I pulled someone over after a meeting. I said, have you got a minute? And he said, sure. And there's people around, and we're talking, and I'm telling him what happened this day, and then I got this phone call, and he's really listening. And I'm going on, and that happened, and the way, how I understand, he's like a laser beam. He's right there hanging on every word. There's noise around us, people. He's with me. And I'm going on and on and on and on and on, and suddenly I realize I feel better. I feel better. So I thanked him. Thank you, I feel better. You know what he said to me? He said, no, thank you. You helped me a lot. I said, no, you helped me a lot. He said, no, you helped me a lot. I thought Narcotics Anonymous was a very strange place. I started listening to what you were talking about, and I couldn't help but compare and look for differences instead of similarities. And, I was older than all but a few experienced members. Everyone was younger. And you're talking a lot about God this and God that, and God hadn't been part of my life for quite a while. And how was that going to be possible for somebody like me? And also you were talking about, it seemed like just about everybody was on welfare, living in a shelter, had lost everything. And that was not my experience. I was looking for differences. My rent was paid. I had a bank account. I just didn't want to live. I often say I lost everyone, not everything. So I'm sitting there and wondering how these problems could possibly be overcome. But again, I surprised myself, and I befriended an experienced member and another experienced member, and I had some go-to guys to ask questions about what was going on. How can I ever? He said, you keep coming and something will happen. He was going to be right, but it seemed incredible. I said, but I didn't lose everything. My rent is paid. He says, we don't care how much or how little you have. We don't care. So he calmed me down, and I came back another day. Still not sure I was going to stay. And I couldn't help but notice that people that were as new as me, counting clean time like me, of course I was counting as that other name. My name was Joe, and I'm an addict. When I tried to, they were sharing, and they were eloquent. They went on, and sounded like they were saying some real stuff. I don't know. These people as new as me, and when I tried it, I got picked, and I got so nervous. And my name is Joe, and I go blank. And there'd be this long silence, and I'd have to say, thanks for letting me share. And I would feel terrible, and I tried it again, and the same thing happened, and I tried it again, and the same thing happened. And as this was going on, I was listening to your directions, which were, let us know what's going on with you, whatever it is. We can't help you unless we know what you're going through. And I decided to take it literally. At that point, I began raising my hand. When I was picked, again, I was very nervous, but I said, my name is Joe, I'm an addict, and you said to tell you what's going on with me. What's going on with me is I get very nervous sharing. Thanks for letting me share. 30 seconds and out. And I did it again in another meeting, and again in another meeting there. And over time, I was able to put some sentences together. I was taking your directions literally, and they worked. And people, instead of looking badly at me, looking down on me for not being, can't talk, that was what my thinking said, they would come up to me and said, I think it's wonderful what you're doing, Joe. I think it's wonderful. That shows humility. Well, that's a word that had never been associated with me. They were complimenting me on doing what they were asking me to do, and it started to work. And another obstacle fell by the wayside. And I started to get the thought that maybe this could work for me. And I had to clean up a mess, which was that name thing. Now, I pondered staying with the name. I had gotten used to it. I was answering to it. People seemed to like me. Incredible. What would my getting honest about that do? They would think awful of me that I lied to them about the most simple thing. But somehow the program works and we get honest despite ourselves. And one day my hand went up and I said the words, "My real name is Phil, not Joe, and I'm an addict." And what did they do? They laughed. There was minutes of hilarity. The meeting couldn't go on. I needn't have worried. I was joining a fellowship of liars. So I'm committed. I'm doing service in a group. People seem to like me. They're calling me Phil now. And a number of months into this, I realized I had a reservation. I kind of knew it. By the way, it's amazingly similar to the kind that Amanda shared here last night. I had a drawer full of stuff with 7, 8 months clean that shouldn't be in my apartment, and there were no drugs. But there were rollers, roach clips, rolling papers, screens. Why did I need that stuff if I was going to stay? So I shared it at a meeting. There's some stuff, I don't know if I should have it. And everyone shared behind me after I had shared that in the meeting. They said, "Phil, get rid of it. That endangers your recovery." I went home. I stared at the drawer it was in, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. Went back to that same meeting and said, I couldn't do it. There's still stuff in that drawer. After the meeting, they formed a circle around me. They said, "Phil, how can we help? What can we do? That's dangerous for you." I said, "Come with me." 2 carloads of people showed up at my building, held the bag, the plastic bag, made me empty the drawer, took the stuff and dropped it in a dumpster, and I was rid of my reservation, and I got an important lesson that what we can't do alone, we can do together. Okay, I need 2 volunteers for what we're going to do next. Okay, you, and who else? You and you. Okay, I need you to stand over there right about under that mural, right there, and facing out this way. And I need you to come on the stage with me. Okay. I need you over on that wall. Okay?
What shall I do?
Stand against that wall. Because I'm going to be talking about the steps, and I want to give you a preview of how change works. No. Back. Facing us.
Well, that's better. Thank you.
Okay, more explicit directions, okay? Okay, what's your name? Pete and?
Joe, Mercy.
Pete and Mercy. Okay. I'm going to go through the steps, but when we get to 4 through 9, I want to tell you how change happens through the process of the steps, okay? I want to demonstrate it. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. It's a multiple choice question. You're facing that way, right? Now, what's the shape of this room? And your choices are round, square, or horizontal. Pete? Steve. Did you change your name? Steve, which one? This is square? All right, the choices again are, it's a simple question. Round, square, or Rectangular, I'm sorry, rectangular. Okay, that's the right answer.
Marcy says rectangular.
Oh,
too.
see that I picked the right person, the right people. Okay, now, from where you're standing, this is the other question. From where you're standing, Steve, it's Steve, right? This room looks wider than it is deep or deeper than it is wide? From where you're standing, that's how it looks? Somebody help him. How does it look, Steve, Pete? Wider than it's deep. From where you're standing, how does this room look?
It looks deeper than it is wide.
She says deeper than it is wide. He said wider than it is deep. And the thing is, you're both right. It depends on your perspective. Depends on your perspective. And that's what the program gives us, to look at our lives. The room can represent our life from a different angle. Our life is our life. It hasn't changed. But we get to look at it from a different angle. Thank you, Marcy. Thank you, Steve. The first step. I'm going to say that the first three, the disclaimer first. In sharing my understanding of the steps, this is my understanding. It doesn't have to be similar to yours or someone else's that you've heard. Take what you need and leave the rest. That allows me to be free to really give you my understanding, allows you to be free to disagree with it without accosting me at the end of the meeting. First three steps are about collecting evidence, all three. First step in the Step Working Guide says we are proving our powerlessness to ourself, meaning powerlessness over the disease. We're proving it. That's another way of saying we're proving how powerful the disease is over us. And the Step Working Guide has all these wonderful questions that are practical and focused on today and are not focused on what my sponsor calls the thrilling days of yesteryear. They're about today. Questions like, do we take challenges as personal insults that can make our life unmanageable? Do we have a crisis mentality that a little thing suddenly spoils our whole day? Does our personality change when we're acting out on our day? Practical stuff. And a lot of my current manifestations, because that's what it asks us to look at, our current manifestations are around computer and saving money. I know a lot of us want to spend more than we have, but my problem is the opposite. I am tight with money. I don't like to give it up. And we both have a similar problem. We lack balance. So I can be using my computer. I joined the 21st century not that long ago. I have a computer, and I can want something to happen, and it won't do it. And I get angry at the computer. Those damn pop-ups, they piss me off. And I can be in a bad mood for a good hour. That's my disease, wanting the computer to do what I want it to do. And saving money, I take to extremes, right? My compulsion takes me to some places. And when I bought the computer, that was a big concession on my part because it's a pricey item. And I figured that's a lot of money, that's enough. I don't need home service with a monthly charge, thank you. And at that point, some places had begun offering Wi-Fi. So I would take my laptop and go to the Wi-Fi place frequently. And one time, many visits ago, I actually bought a cup of coffee. And I saved the cup. And every time I went back to the coffee Wi-Fi place, I took the cup and placed it prominently on the table and opened my laptop, and they left me alone, and I was able to steal their Wi-Fi. There's a question in there, acting on my addiction, did I go against my beliefs and values? Anyway, we collect evidence of how powerful our disease is. We collect it when we're writing this step, but we also collect it ongoing. We get more and more evidence that the disease is really powerful, in the present, in the moment. And there'll always be another damn current manifestation. Second step. Second step is about putting ourselves in position to allow someone to talk us off the ledge. To talk us off the ledge. Remember those old-time movies where somebody would have something bad happen to them and they'd want to give up and they climb out the window and they're standing on the ledge and the traffic is below and they're getting ready to jump and somebody comes to the window and sticks their head out and talks them off the ledge. That's kind of what the second step is. If we've ever seen someone take a burning desire, you have that in Indiana? Burning desire? You know what I mean, right? Somebody takes a burning desire, I want to use, yada, 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 and by the end of this year, most times, they're fine, they don't want to use. Something happens. We put ourselves in position. We ask for help. We get what we need, and the feeling passes. Insanity is always feelings associated with harming ourselves, the self-destructive part. When I went to the guy and experienced the therapeutic value, when I had that bad day and he was really listening, and at the end I felt better, that was the second step. That was evidence that I could be restored, that I didn't have to hurt myself. And with a couple of years clean, I had a sponsor, and I was plugged in, and I didn't go on one of those international trips my first year. I was being cautious and careful, and I want to stay. But around the second year, it was the time of the year I usually went, and I picked a country, and you can make phone reservations, not actually buy the ticket then. I made a phone reservation to go to this country, and I thought, gee, I really should let my sponsor know. I should let him know I won't be here for those number of days. I'll let him know. And I called him up and I said, I'm going to be out of the country. I'm taking a trip. I feel secure enough that I can go out of the country and not use, and I'll be fine. And I waited this long, and he says, fine. Where are you going? What country? He said, where are you going? I said, South America. He says, where is this country? And I looked at the map, and he said, it's between Peru and Colombia. And he says, I suggest you not go. And the most amazing thing happened. I got the willingness to not go. Collecting evidence, we have a series of experiences where can't be adequately explained in words. We get the willingness to not hurt ourselves. It can be sharing about what we don't want to do, like pay a bill, so that we get the willingness to do it. It can be sharing what we want to do, like go to Ecuador, so that we don't do it. It can be outright asking for help. It can be simply presenting my problem, which is what I did with that therapeutic value thing. Something happens that can't be adequately explained in words, and we're often running in the spiritual part of the program. We need to collect a lot of evidence, not pass over it with a minimum of concern to get ready for the next step. But between 2 and 3, for me, something happens. We have to ask ourselves the question. I've had a series of experiences that make me scratch my head, that don't make sense logically, but I got the willingness to that happened, and what made it happen? What made it happen? And however we answer that question is the beginning of a relationship with a higher power. We have to attribute it to something. And I came up with the phrase, there's a force working in my life. And that got me started. That's between step 2 and 3. I call it step 2.5. The third step, we collect a different kind of evidence. When we get out of God's way, how do things work out? Usually, wonderfully. But we need to recognize when we're in self-will so that we can turn it over. We need to recognize we're in self-will. When I'm on the sidewalk and I'm directing traffic, that's self-will. I need to let people walk as slow as fast, and it's not my sidewalk. When I pick people to be in my life, whether they gave me any encouragement or not, and barged in there and tried to convince them to stay, and it didn't work out, that was self-will. I wasn't relying on the force that's working in my life. I was getting in the way. Whenever we send a representative, do you know what that means? That's a New York expression, I think. Whenever we change ourselves to be accepted, to please people, to make people like us, we dress to impress, or we turn on our charm consciously, or we become somebody that we're not in order to call it people-pleasing, call it getting over. We're in self-will. We're trying to make something happen that wouldn't necessarily happen and probably shouldn't happen. But anyway, in the third step, we collect a lot of experiences where, when we get out of the way, the most wonderful things happen. So the fourth step that begins the middle section of steps 4 through 9, called the process within the process in the Step Working Guide. And in Works on Why, it says that we can't change the past, but we're at the beginning of the part of the program where we're going to find a different way of looking at it. Though painful and sad, the past cannot be changed. However, the past cannot be changed. It's in the books. It's etched in stone. The warped beliefs we have developed about ourselves and others can be changed. And so we begin 4 through 9, the change steps. In my fourth step, I use the word disappointed many, many times. I was disappointed in everyone. Everyone. This one wasn't who I thought they were. This one let me down. This one betrayed me. This one. Disappointed. Throughout my fourth step. I talked about when I was in a relationship, a romantic relationship, and it seemed to be going well. I couldn't enjoy it. It didn't seem real. I didn't know what that was about. I wrote about that. I wrote about a resentment I had with my mother. I resented my mother for the way she brought me up. It created situations where I didn't have social skills, and I was bullied, and I was ridiculed, and I blamed her. I had a resentment with my mother. And I had this thing I noticed about me that normal people, when they make a mistake, they can just shrug their shoulders and say, well, I'll do better next time. But Phil, not Joe, Phil, when I would make a mistake, I noticed that it was mood altering. I would go all the way through, I'll do better next time, all the way to, I'm worthless. And it would kill my day. It would be mood altering. I couldn't make a mistake. And I wrote about that. That came out in my fourth step. And I went to my sponsor and shared my fifth step. And a sponsor in the fifth step connects the dots. He listens to the whole thing, but he picks on something in this section and something we happen to say here and something we said at the other section, and he ties them together and comes up with a truth. And one of the truths was, that he pointed out, is, Phil, the reason those relationships didn't seem real while they were going on was that you weren't real. What do you mean, sponsor? He said, well, I'm listening, and you have a fear of confrontation when things needed to be brought up to the other person. when you needed to let them know that what they were doing was bothering you. Or the other person was raising their voice and complaining about something you did. You wrote that you would change the subject in order not to have to go through the whole thing, the confrontation. You have a fear of confrontation. So things got swept under the rug that never got dealt with. And you also told me that you kept track of the ways people disappointed you, Phil. You're a grievance collector. I'm a grievance collector. You're a grievance collector. You told me you kept lists for everyone of all the ways they disappointed you. And that at one point, when the list got long enough, they were out of your life, Phil. That's what you weren't real. You weren't honest. That wasn't what was really going on. Huh. And then he said, by the way, who picked all these people that disappointed you? Who picked them to be in your life? I did. I played a part. This is the kind of thing that happens in a fifth step. And he says this thing about making mistakes. Well, from that point on, whenever we would talk on the phone and I would say something about my day and how I messed up about this and I should have known better about that, he would simply go, gee, I guess perfect Phil would have done that better, wouldn't he? Perfect Phil wouldn't have done that. And he was telling me that I was comparing myself to a perfect version of myself, which is a very unfair thing to do to myself. Does anyone identify? I know the fifth step, when we share about it, we often emphasize the fact that we shared a secret that we'd never shared with anyone before. That's often the main theme at a fifth step meeting and a fifth step share. My understanding is certainly that's part of the fifth step, and that's an opportunity to get really honest. And that's part of the information that our listener takes in order to connect the dots, in order to come up with exact natures. And it's certainly a gratifying moment when we can say whatever it is, and the ceiling doesn't fall in, the floor doesn't open up, and the sponsor shrugs his shoulders. He's heard something like that before. That may feel good. But we're looking not just for relief, we're looking for freedom. So I maintain that that's part of the fifth step, but the most important thing is having chose a listener with insight to be able to connect the dots. The dreaded sixth step. Dreaded sixth step. Defects like perfectionism. Defects like intimidation, not just fear, more specific. When somebody raises their voice at me, I can't function, I can't hear you anymore. It's like everything's slow motion, I'm underwater, and I can't think of anything to respond. I can't stand up for myself. The next day I think of what I might have said at that moment. Intimidation, a character defect. Arrogance, again, sidewalks. Again, with years of recovery, I'm walking down the sidewalk in New York. There's a clump of people there where I'm going to be needing to go in that direction. And I'm getting closer, and they're deep in conversation or something. They're right there in my path. My thinking tells me, honestly, they're going to part and let me through. They're going to, I'm so important, right? And then sometimes we discover a behavior that involves not one, but multiple defects. And there's, these restaurants that are called buffet restaurants, all-you-can-eat restaurants. Yeah, I told you I don't like to spend money. I look for bargains and stuff. I bring Ziploc bags to buffet restaurants. And I leave there with tomorrow's lunch, the next day's supper, greed, wanting more than my share, dishonesty, and rebelliousness. I'm a rule breaker. Multiple defects we notice in the dreaded sixth step. I have the trifecta. But the seventh step. See, the sixth step, we try not to do what we want to do. Defects, we want to do them. They come naturally. We try to suppress them. We say, next time I go to the buffet restaurant, I'm not going to do that. Next time I bring my laptop to the coffee, I'm not going to, but we do it again. Next time, I'm not going to say hurtful things, even if I feel like saying hurtful things, and white-knuckling it never worked around drugs, right? We had small periods of success, and then we would use. Just say no doesn't work. We need more. We need some spiritual solution to this problem. The sixth step results in failure. We're supposed to fail. We're supposed to stay with it long enough to really convince ourselves we cannot stop by ourselves. We cannot stop using defects by ourselves. That sets us up for the seventh step, where we involve the force that's working in our life, or whatever you choose to call yours. But we have to do something. My God is not an enabler, and I have to do something to show my higher power there's a reason to remove the defect, that I'm really trying to get better. So I need to practice the spiritual opposites in 7. And when I'm confronted, and somebody raises their voice and says, Phil, I don't like what you did, you pissed me off, when I need to grab hold of something and go through it and practice courage in place of intimidation. I need to do it as well as I can do it. Probably not great, but I need to try to do it. I need to practice compassion for myself in place of my damn perfectionism. Give myself a break so you didn't bring what you said you were going to bring, so you forgot something. So what? Be kinder to myself. I need to practice surrender rather than be rebellious. I need to practice prudence in place of recklessness, and so on. And I need to pray at that moment, help me feel this spiritual principle I'm practicing more than I'm feeling the defect. That's another way of saying remove the defect. And we have victories in the seventh step. It's kind of the payoff from 4 through 7. We have victories, and we have moments where we're like pinching ourselves and we're saying, gee, I would have said this in that situation, and I didn't even have the impulse to. I would have done that in the past, and I didn't do it. Again, the spiritual part of the program, something happens that we can't explain when we involve the spiritual part. And I love the way, and something else happens around the seventh step. Before we did the work on the steps up to this, we didn't think about others. Along with our ability to think of ourselves as human beings, we begin to feel that others are doing the best they can. When somebody acts on a defect that we know we have, that we know we've acted on, and we see it in our face, instead of judging when others act on a character defect, we feel empathy rather than annoyance. Something important happens around the seventh step. We're beginning, said before, we couldn't afford a spirit of generosity when we're out there using. And we come in and we're still takers. But we're beginning to be able to put ourselves in other people's shoes. We're beginning to be able to afford to be generous with other people, to not beat them up because they're acting out, because we act out too. And that's a big one. That's a big part that sets us up for 8. Now we want to be honest about the list we're going to make. Now we want to be relieved of guilt. And we do the best we can in making the list, but we're in a different place. We realize we're part of the universe. We're like other people. We don't have to be so ashamed that we don't admit, because that's all we do in the 8th step is we admit. And I had to do a little work to separate what my mother did to me, bringing me up the way she did, from the things I did to her. I said hurtful things to her, and basically I abandoned her as an adult. When I got out of the house where I had been held captive, I visited her and talked to her the minimum, and it was all surface stuff, and I'm an only child, and I hurt her a lot by my absence and my neglect. And I admitted that on my 8-step list after I had separated out what she did to me, because that had to be done. I had, what I did in society, the scenes I made in restaurants, the ownership of the sidewalk that I didn't own, and directing people around and stuff like that. I had to put society on my list. I was not a good citizen of the neighborhood. I terrorized the neighborhood in a sense, right? And I had to put myself on the list for all the reasons it talks about, but also for dereliction. I put myself in such harm's way on those trips. I put myself in such danger, copping where I copped, breaking other countries' laws. And I believe we all have another reason to put ourselves on an 8-step list is the very fact we come into recovery with self-loathing, hating ourselves. We don't yet know about the disease, but it was the disease that held a gun to our head, so to speak, and caused us to do those bad things we did while we were active. And the part of our self-loathing that hates ourselves for what we did active is not justified. We were under the control of the disease. And there are other reasons we find to put ourselves on the list. And in the 9th step, we make the amends, and we not only mend our fences, we mend our ways. We have to change our way of living in the present. It's like a commitment that not only are we going to repair the damage in whatever form it was, but we're going to change. We're not going to do anything like that. We're going to really try not to do anything like that ongoing. And I went to my mother's gravesite. Now, up to then, the guilt I felt for my mother in meetings, I'd be sitting there, feeling fine, and some damn person would be talking about being a bad son or daughter to their mother and not doing things not being, and I'd be crying now. I'd be crying. I had a fine day, and, that's no good. Or I'd be pissed off that why'd you have to mention that? The past intrudes on the present. It intrudes on the present. But healing gets done in the 9th step. And I went to my mother's gravesite and I read the letter. And from that point on, the meetings I made, occasionally somebody would talk about being a bad son or a daughter and not taking care of their mother and showing indifference and saying hurtful things. And I'd be okay. I would feel empathy for what they were sharing, but I would not be emotionally upset. I would not be mood altered. Healing gets done in the 9th step. Again, something spiritual. I just read a letter. Now I'm not experiencing the same reaction I had. This program is a lot like what Arsenio Hall says. You remember Arsenio Hall? There are a lot of things that make you go, I make amends to society by being a good citizen. When tourists ask me directions, I give them good directions. I don't litter. I hold doors for people, which is amazing. I used to let them go and let the door. I used to get a kick. I hold door. I do it instinctively. I get off an elevator and hello? It just went out. Can't explain this stuff. Healing gets done. We change. The 10th step says we admit when we're wrong, but it doesn't say to whom. It says promptly, but it doesn't say to whom. So that means it doesn't always have to be the person that's concerned. We admit, We can come to a meeting and admit it to a room full of people, none of which were involved in the issue. Or we can pick someone aside or make a phone call and say, you know what I just did? I just did this and I was wrong. 3 magical little words that clears our side of the street. For example, I compare my insides to other people's outsides, and sometimes I even compare my outsides to other people's outsides. I wanted to learn how to line dance. I took a class in line dancing, and I couldn't help but noticing everyone in the class was at least 20 years younger than me. But I went to line dance, and it was an hour-long class with continuous music. First we did this one, then that one, nonstop. And halfway through, I had to sit down, and nobody else did. And I beat myself up about that until I had to admit I was wrong, that I was there, I was in line dance class, and I was dancing most of the time and trying to get it and give myself credit. See, the 10-step isn't always about admitting we're wrong. Sometimes we give ourselves credit. I have to give myself credit this weekend for how I handled the trip here, the disappointments and the changes of plans. When they announced the flight was canceled, I didn't make a scene. I didn't throw a tantrum. I went to plan B. In the 10-step, we give ourselves credit for doing things right. It isn't all about, I was wrong, I was wrong, I was wrong. And sometimes the 10-step is about staying away from people, places, and things where we're likely to do something that we'll have to admit we're wrong. So I can't go to buffet restaurants. I'm forbidden. The wonderful 11-step, and I want to say 10, 11, and 12 are pay attention steps. We have to pay attention to how we're behaving. We pay attention to some things in 10 and 11 and 12. And in 11, we're trying to improve conscious contact, so we need to pay attention because higher power may speak to us in some way. Mine speaks to me through people, through situations, and through events. And I let higher power pick people to be put in my life. I don't pick people anymore. I don't pursue people to be in my life. I sit back, and everyone in my life today picked me. And I have lots of people in my life. I have wonderful people in my life. And they picked me. I got out of God's way, and every so often someone will be put in my path. But I have to pay attention to what may be directions from God. They're like arrows on a highway. Turn left when you get, there's like arrows, situations, events, as well as people. So when I get a call in January to come to Indiana in May, and there's nothing on my docket I can go, I automatically say yes, and I don't know the reason why I'm supposed to be here other than to carry the message. There's some other reason. I've gone to conventions and met people that I never would have met otherwise, but because I followed the arrow and showed up, we got into a conversation, we clicked, we continued on like with Alex. I need to pay attention because anything might be communication from higher power. It doesn't mean everything is, because I'm not that important. But I need to go through my day in a state of meditation. Meditation is listening for God's answer. It isn't always a formal meditation. I try to consciously be aware of what's going on, pay attention, that maybe He's speaking through that person, or maybe this chance event that happened isn't a chance event. I'm trying to be told something. And I have to see that when I got on the last leg of the journey from Cleveland, it was to South Bend where I was met, that bus ride was different. There was something different about it that told me this weekend's going to be all right despite the hassle of getting here. It was quiet. People are talking in hushed voices on a bus. I'm looking out the window, going across northern Ohio. I'm seeing the most gorgeous farmland to a city guy like me. Gorgeous scenery. And it's a different kind of bus ride. And I interpreted that as communication from higher power that, Phil, this weekend's going to be all right despite how it began. And it sure has. And then the 12th step, paying attention to other things. But now we can afford to be generous. The taker by the 12th step has become a giver. It's just what happens, it's what we do. You see evidence of it. I no longer want to get the better of the deal. I no longer want to get more than my share. I'm more than willing to give more than I'm getting because God helps us as we help each other. If I help this person here, not wanting anything in return, and this person here, that doesn't mean my needs aren't met. Someone over there helps me. Someone over there gives me what I need. I don't need it to get it from the people I'm giving it to. God helps us as we help each other. And I show up for people in hospitals, at court, when they're going to their doctor to find out the results of their HIV test. I've been there for people. I answer the phone. I really only have a cell phone for one reason, to be available to the people in my life so that when I'm not home, they can call me. I don't like paying the damn monthly bill. So I have to pay attention to who I can help, sitting in a meeting, being aware of a newcomer who has a sad look on his face, who has shared something that I can relate to, and I can position myself in the serenity circle. I'm not afraid to cross the room and be right next to that person. So as soon as we say the prayer, I can say, would you like to talk? Maybe they'll say yes, and maybe they say no. But I'm available, visible and available, both, not just visible. And I need to pay attention to monitor my behavior, that I'm practicing these principles, not just around the meetings, but elsewhere. So when no one sees me in New York City, there's no NA members around, there's no brownie points I'm going to make. And this is one area that really touches me. When there's a blind person standing on the corner waiting for the lights to change. Jeez, how helpless, how vulnerable. And I say, you want help going across the street, or do you want me to tell you when it turns green? And again, whether they accept my offer or not, I feel impelled to do that. I monitor my behavior. I have to practice these principles out there, not in here. So, my understanding of the 12 steps doesn't have to be like yours. Based on my experience, based on anyone's experience, we get a point of view. It's okay to express our point of view. I want to close with this. When I was a young man, when I was a kid, many, many, many years ago, it was a long time ago, we didn't have video games, we didn't have the usual things kids have to play with today, nothing like that. We had something called children's story books. Some of you remember children's story books? Wonderful stories with a moral at the end. Jack and the Beanstalk, Hansel and Gretel, the tortoise and the hare, those kind of things. Well, my favorite children's book story was The Ugly Duckling. In this story, this baby duck, this ugly duckling, is different than the rest. He has a different kind of feathers, and he looks different. He has a longer neck, and he's paddling along with the ducks, and they consider him a disgrace. They consider him a disgrace. and they bite him, it says in the story. He experiences abuse as well as feeling not lovable. And he's paddling along, and he's feeling really bad. And at one point, he splits from the clump, the cackle of whatever they call a bunch of ducks. I don't know what they call them. And he splits, and he's going to try something else now because that felt so bad. And he tries to live on dry land with the chickens in this story. He does a geographical. And that doesn't work out. So he goes back to the pond, and he's paddling, and he discovers he can even fly a little. He's really weird, and he really feels isolated and different. Remember when the seeds were sown? Well, he's alone, and he's paddling, and he's feeling really bad, and one day a flock of swans comes along and sees him. Now, over the winter, he shed his feathers. This is what waterfowl do. He shed his feathers, he got a new coat of feathers, and he's paddling along with his new feathers. The swans see him and recognize him as one of theirs. And the swan goes up to him and says, "Hi, you're one of us, you know." And he says, "What are you talking about?" And the swan says, "Look in the lake, in the pond, and see yourself reflection, and you look like us. You're a swan." And he said, he looks, and "I'm a swan?" They say, "You're a swan." And then they lean over to him, and they say, "Little swan, it's going to be all right." Like those NA members told Phil 21 years ago. And they leaned over to the swan and said, "We're going to love you until you learn to love yourself." And they told him things like this. The little swan found the very type of waterfowl that could best help and understand him. And so did I. And so did I. And if you're new, you stay, and we'll take you around the side of your room to see it from a different perspective, get a better perspective on your life. We'll help you get rid of that misinformation that you're not lovable. You are. That you don't have the right stuff. You have lots of right stuff. And you're not bad. You suffer from a sickness called the disease of addiction. We'll help you with that. And we'll help you find your inner swan. Thanks for letting me share.